with the NFL schedule fully out for all 32 teams, Trey Hendrickson is still in the sticky situation with the Cincinnati Bengals. So I'm trying to see on today's episode some of the best options for Trey Hendrickson to go to. And with Trey Hendrickson now in his career as a journeyman, y'all know we're going to talk about it and break it down right after this.
Welcome to your number one spot for all NFL news and content, NFL Central.
What's going on, ladies and gentlemen? Welcome back into another episode of NFL Central, your number one spot for everything NFL. I'm your host here, Bobby, and I'm holding it down on today's daily episode. So if you tuned in, hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. But let's talk about Trey Hendrickson. We do know that the NFL schedule has been placed out there for a lot of teams, and some teams are getting ready to go through the gauntlet. Just call it what it is. We got a lot of teams that's really going into some sticky situations, especially with some teams that you didn't really think was going to be going into these sticky situations as early as they are about to go into this. And some of those teams include the Detroit Lions, my Chicago Bears, and a number of other teams. But I want to talk about Trey Hendrickson contract situation. We know that situation with the Cincinnati Bengals, it's gotten a bit ugly if we keeping it real. My man's Trey Hendrickson talking about I'm a Florida boy, and you either provoke shark attacks or you go into some unprovoked shark attacks. Hold on, brother. What you mean by that? But we do understand that these contract talks, they can always be sticky for a number of players, especially when that team is looking at you and saying, hey, you're up there in age. Hey, you know what I'm saying? We might not be able to have the financials to go out there and pay you what you really want or place you in that bracket of where you want to get paid at. And then after watching the Cincinnati Bengals just sit idle while Myles Garrett went out there and got $40 million per year and Max Crosby went out there and got $35 million per year, they probably sitting on their hands or just kind of just was turned off to the idea that they had to pay Jamar Chase all that money, T. Higgins all that money, and now looking at Trey Hendrickson like, dang, we got to pay you $35 million too? Yeah, it's probably a huge turnoff. But some of the teams that I'm looking at that they should go all in on Trey Hendrickson, I'm thinking about the cap space. I'm thinking about the potential fit for them and giving Trey Hendrickson an opportunity to play winning football and to think about the team that he could potentially go to and not necessarily just going out there and wasting their time, but just pushing the chips in the center of the table and say, hey, we going all in for it. So I got 3 teams on my list with a potential fourth. I'll start with the fourth. I'm looking at the New England Patriots as an option for Trey Hendrickson. These guys still got over $60 million in cap space due to them not having to pay Drake May. Then I'm looking at the Chicago Bears. Then I'm looking at the Los Angeles Chargers. And lastly, I'm going to talk about the Detroit Lions. Let's start with the Patriots. Now, the Patriots, you just got Mike Vrabel over there. You still have Drake May on his rookie contract. You looking at that and how much cap space you have available to you, I think you can go out there and make a splash play like this, and it does not affect the things that you could potentially do long term when you look at a guy like Drake May and what you will eventually have to pay him years down the road. Now, the thing is that you run into with the Trey Hendrickson stuff is you don't necessarily know how much money he's commanding. He's 30 or 31 years old. He's up there in age. Yes, he is productive. But we know that around this time when it comes for NFL players, a lot of guys start to get hurt more often than not around this age unless they just absolutely taking care of themselves. Trey Hendrickson has been taking care of himself. But again, these type of situations, you don't necessarily know. And I think that if he was maybe 27, 28 years old, that'd be more feasible for a team to look into him. But I'm looking at the New England Patriots simply because you are in the AFC East. You did go out there and improve your coaching staff by signing Mike Vrabel and bringing on his staff. Then you go out there on the defensive side of the ball. You bring in the guy like Milton Williams, who was over there with the Philadelphia Eagles and is now a champion. You bring him on to the team. Then you go out there and you bring Tennessee Titans Harold Landry onto the team. So now you're looking at a way to build out that defense. You already got Christian Gonzalez on the outside. Why not go out there and add an additional piece to maybe go out there and battle for a playoff spot? Now, I know there could be some reservations for the New England Patriots, though, simply because right now it could appear to be a swing too soon. Hence why I got them at the bottom of my list for teams to potentially go all in, because there is no way that you expect Drake May, even though he did show some improvements this past season, to just go in and go to the Super Bowl in year two. But I will argue that if you give yourself, you know what I'm saying, a good chance at it, and you can just say, hey, Trey Hendrickson, talk to his representation and see how much he's willing to take, you can risk some of that cap space that you have just for the foreseeable future. Let's say, for the sake of discussion, you look at the New England Patriots and you say, hey, we're going to go ahead and we're going to give you this 2-year deal. It's a 2-year extension. You getting paid this year, and then have some type of negotiations where you say, Cincy, y'all going to have to count. Y'all going to have to come off that year, and then you extend that guy. We'll see how that necessarily works. But let's say you go and place yourself in the playoffs this year. Now you know how you take steps in the right direction, and then you can really go out there and push for, a deeper playoff run the following year, if that's something that you'll be interested in. My number 3 team is the Chicago Bears. The Chicago Bears, they made a bevy of moves this offseason. They looked at and improved their interior O-line by going out and getting guys like Drew Dalman, Jonah Jackson, and Joe Thuney for that offensive line. And even in the draft, they drafted an additional offensive line who many believe that he was the most NFL-ready lineman available at that time that the Chicago Bears selected him, in Ozzie Trapillo. And you look at that situation and the Chicago Bears flipping things on the defensive side and saying, hey, go and give me Grady Jarrett. Hey, I'm going to already have a Javon Dexter who already showed improvements from last season. And then you go and sign Dayo Oyendingbo for your defensive line as well, who can play inside and outside. And you understand that with looking at your schedule, it's a tall task for the Chicago Bears with the new head coach and Ben Johnson, with the young quarterback going into his second year, who didn't have the greatest year, but I would say that it was solid for what the hell he went through last year in Caleb Williams. So you look at that, I think it's really, really going to be difficult in a decision that the Chicago Bears would not be willing to make at the moment. But if they see a good start to their season and they just say, yes, we're one piece away, we can really push this thing and try to give ourselves a better chance for a deep playoff run, I can absolutely see them exploring this option. But it's always going to come back to, what does that discussion look like with the Cincinnati Bengals, and what are they trying to get in return for a Trey Hendrickson? Because if I got to go out there and give you a high draft pick and still pay this man upwards of $30 million, that can be a bit of a turnoff if we keeping it a buck. The number 2 team on my list, the Los Angeles Chargers, I'm looking at this as we are right on schedule, in my personal opinion. Hence why I got the Los Angeles Chargers listed as the second team that should go and look at Trey Hendrickson to go all in. You've seen the Kansas City Chiefs, and you know that they've been running the AFC West for 7 years now? At some point, you got to go out there and say, we finna put everything on the table so we can go ahead and knock these guys down. In the Los Angeles Chargers, they had a solid season this past season, even made the playoffs. And now you look at this and you could say, hey, what about that pass rush? Excuse me. What about that pass rush can help us improve this team to the point to where when we do face up against a Josh Allen, a Lamar Jackson, a Patrick Mahomes in the playoffs, we can make sure that those guys are having a bad game, because that's how the Philadelphia Eagles really, really dominated that Super Bowl versus the Kansas City Chiefs. It was all due to that pressure that was coming nonstop on Patrick Mahomes in that offensive line. You expect the Chiefs to improve, but I think that the gap between the Chiefs and the Chargers has closed tremendously from years past. And my man's Jim Harbaugh, head coach of the Los Angeles Chargers, came out and put it on wax himself. Said, I woke up one morning and said, how do I get Justin Herbert in as a Hall of Famer? Look, You got some cases to where you got players that play all these number of years and put up stats, and sometimes that still don't get them in as first ballot. Sometimes it don't even get them in as second ballot. But if you go out there and you win you some championships and you got the stats to back it up, you absolutely will be able to stamp your introduction into the Hall of Fame if you are Justin Herbert, if you are Jim Harbaugh. And right now, we looking at the team over there. They do got some good offensive weapons. The defense does need a little bit work. I wonder if them moving off of Joey Bosa, it will be a turnoff to this move. I'm gonna gotta keep it real with that. But at the same time, Trey Hendrickson is healthy and he's productive. You know that one of the things that you had to worry about if you're the Los Angeles Chargers is that Joey Bosa wasn't healthy. And when he was healthy, the production didn't live up to the expectations. And I understand you did go out there and get Khalil Mack some money. And I do understand that will be a little bit of movement that has to be done for the Los Angeles Chargers to make a move like this. But I still think that if they want to say we're going all in, Trey Hendrickson should be on the Los Angeles Chargers radar. And my number one team is the Detroit Lions. Y'all know I got this is NFL channel. We got to keep it objective. Even though I am a Chicago Bears fan, I got to keep it objective when we talking about these teams. The Detroit Lions, the way they season ended was horrible. The way that their season ended was horrible. I think they had like 10, I don't know the exact number, but 10 plus injuries on that defensive line. And a lot of them was season ending injuries, even an injury to one of your top guys in Aiden Hutchinson. And we know he's gonna be coming back, but I think part of that injury, you know what I'm saying? It was if I remember the play correctly, it was a bit weird. The play was, but a lot of those injuries start to add up when there's a huge amount of pressure or a huge amount of responsibility placed on one player. And I think Aiden Hutchinson, he had a huge responsibility to carry the pass rush for the Detroit Lions. And again, there will be some type of movement that has to be done to go and get a Trey Hendrickson and re-up on him. But that's why I'm believing my man Trey Hendrickson could be becoming a journeyman in this league personally. But to finish with the Detroit Lions, I think that the way that your season ended this past season, or early exit in the playoffs after a hell of a regular season, and now you go out there and you lose your top coordinators and some really good coordinators in Aaron Glenn and Ben Johnson. You lose one of them to me. Shout out to Detroit. I ain't mad at you. But I think that a move like that will help them kind of stabilize things a little bit more. And I do understand the challenges of trying to get Trey Hendrickson and considering how long you can have him when you got Sam Laporta that you might have to look at some money for. You got Jameson Williams that you have to look at some money that you might have to hand out. But they did go out there and draft a few defensive guys, and they did re-up on Alquan Muhammad as a pass rusher, but it doesn't really necessarily move me to the extent of if they would have had Aiden Hutchinson coming off one side and you got Trey Hendrickson coming off on the other. That's a hell of a pass rush to be worried about each and every Sunday or whenever the game is played. But it leads on to my next point with all these different things that we're talking about. It might be very, very difficult for Trey Hendrickson to continue in, you know what I'm saying? Let me preface this correctly. It might be good for Trey Hendrickson to stay put, but it also might be a detriment to how his career is going to pan out for the foreseeable future. And what I mean by that is that I think that Trey Hendrickson could potentially be on the verge of becoming a journeyman. And when I'm looking at some examples, I'm looking at Hassan Reddick. Remember him? 2 solid seasons with the Philadelphia Eagles a couple years ago. And Hassan Reddick, look, his last 2 seasons in Philly, he had 27 total sacks. And they didn't want to pay him because he was up there in age. Gets traded to the Jets. They didn't even want to pay him. That was some type of dialogue or some type of miscommunication that went along the way. And now, after spending 1 year with the Jets, You go and you sign a 1-year deal with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and it's now looking like the way he's going to end his career is going to be as a journeyman. I think that Trey Hendrickson is kind of on the verge of that same type of thing right there, with him potentially ending his career as a journeyman, because the Cincinnati Bengals, they drew the line in the sand for themselves. They said, we not paying you, bruh. We paying Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase, and T. Higgins. And we're going to go out and get Shamar Stewart, and we're going to figure it out that way. Now, the way that I see it is that you'd have made a crazy-ass mistake if you're the Cincinnati Bengals, in my opinion, simply because you going and banking off a guy that only had 4.5 sacks in his collegiate career, and he already ticked off on the sideline and sitting out a rookie mini camp. And now you got one of the most productive edges in this game right now going through similar stuff, and he's been in this game and more proven than the rookie that you already running into you issues with, along with the linebacker that you just drafted. Yeah, it's some situations over there, but it's the way that the business works. We seen it plenty of times, man. Guys go out there, they got a bunch of talent, they come in, they can produce, you know what I'm saying, and it just don't work out for teams wanting to lock these guys up long term. Looking at guys like Trey Hendrickson, you could be very well be Hassan Reddick. He bouncing around. Zadarius Smith, he's been bouncing around. Jadeveon Clowney has been cut again. So look, like I said, I'm fighting for the man to get his money because I think he's earned that. But at the same time, the NFL is telling you how they think about older pass rushers. And at a certain point, once they hit a certain age, they don't want to pay you $30 million. So it's going to be interesting to see how it all pans out for Trey Hendrickson, because man, $30 million, that's a hefty price tag for a guy that's 31. If we keeping it a buck, I think he's earned it, but that's not my decision to make at the end of the day. But hey, let me know how y'all feeling about the things that we discussed today. The 4 teams that I put out there that said that they should go all in on Trey Hendrickson. That's New England Patriots, the Chicago Bears, the Los Angeles Chargers, and the Detroit Lions. And then how do you feel about Trey Hendrickson potentially becoming a journeyman to end out his career in this NFL? Because that bad. The NFL, when they speak, they speak. And a lot of times you ain't getting your way, depending on how it plays out. So let me know your thoughts and everything down below, because that is it for me today, y'all. I appreciate y'all for tuning in into another episode, man. Before you get up out of here, please provide your feedback, comments, concerns down in the comment box for me. And man, y'all already know, always love football, man. Y'all already know. I'm going to catch y'all on the next one for sure.